Everyone. Thank you for dialing into our webinar session today. We really appreciate your attendance. I know there's so many things going on at the moment, and I know that a lot of businesses are really busy trying to get everything together still. So we really appreciate your time. My name is Misha Bristow. I'm the Business Development Manager at Paycheck, and I'm joined by Katie, who is our Head of Marketing and Business Development. And we wanted to put together this webinar for our current clients, just to run you through what has been announced by the government, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and to go into detail about that, but also to be able to answer any questions that you guys might have. I'm going to pass over to Katie now, who'll just give you a brief overview of what she's been involved in over the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Misha, and yes, welcome to all of our clients who are joining us today. Some of you may know me, some may not. So I've worked at Paycheck for a long time now, almost 16 years, and so I've worked all the way through different payroll and kind of management roles. And so what I've been doing for the last few weeks is really keeping on top of all the guidance that's been issued, so that we can better inform our clients. All of you are running payrolls in different industries, so what we've been doing is really trying to curate as many answers as possible to as many different situations. And so that's why Misha has me here today to answer your questions, because we have been working really closely, not just with the payroll industry, but with various different industry groups as well, to really make sure that we're getting the right answers from HMRC, and that we're making the best interpretations possible, so that as far as possible our clients can start to put together those claims ready for when the portal opens with HMRC in a couple of days' time.
Perfect, thanks, Katie. So just run you through the agenda for today's session. 2 seconds, it should be coming up. So the session for today, Katie's going to run you through the mechanics behind what's been announced by HMRC recently, and what is on offer for employers. We'll then go into detail about furlough and what that means for you guys as employers, what the entitlement is, and then we'll explain how to administer those changes, so what is required in order for you to be able to claim that money back. But the majority of the session is actually over to you guys, really, for you to submit as many questions as you have. Now is your opportunity to be able to do that. So there's a question box on the right hand side of your screen. So anything that you have, please pop that through as we go throughout the session. When we come to the end, when we go through the questions, you're still more than welcome to keep submitting them. We will answer as many questions for however long we have time for, and however many questions that we have. Any that we do miss, we will be following up the session with a recording. So this is all being recorded now, so you can refer back to anything at any point. But also our contact details will be available. So if you do think of anything after the session today, then you are more than welcome to get back in touch with us. So I'm going to pass over to Katie now, so she can run you through the first half of the presentation.
That's great. So in terms of the COVID-19 mechanics, the main one that has come out is the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. It's a temporary scheme open to all UK employers that have been running since at least the 28th of February. So your PAYE scheme should have been registered before then, and you have to have had a UK bank account also. The scheme is lasting for 3 months, starting from the 1st of March. So that's not from when you first furlough an employee. That the scheme actually runs from the 1st of March. And at the end of that initial temporary 3-month kind of process, the Chancellor has said that they will review the scheme. They haven't given any indication as yet that it will extend. So it will be an online service that you'll be using to make your claims. We have had recent confirmation just before the bank holiday that the scheme will be opening on the 20th of April. And we'll go into some of the mechanics of what you actually need for that a little bit later on. But from the sounds of it, they're saying that the scheme will be open on the 20th of April, and they're expecting that payments will start to be made to employers by backs. So that's a short turnaround, 3-day payment, as early as 10 days after your submission. So the things that you need to be able to do to make a claim, for starters, you need to have furloughed some employees. What this means is that you have had a business interruption due to the pandemic. And because of this business interruption, there is no longer work available for some or all of your workforce. When that is true, you can then furlough an employee, which is making a contractual change to the way in which they are an employee with you, which says that they will no longer do any work for you during that furlough period. And you will, in exchange, you will claim them, you will pay them 80% of their wage, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month. And you will be able to make that claim back through the job retention scheme from HMRC. And on top of that claim, you will also be able to claim the employer national insurance and the minimum auto enrolment contributions. So really, that is almost all of your cost for keeping those employees on your books, and that's where the job retention process is being enacted. The scheme covers employees who have been on your payroll since on or before the 28th of February. But if you made some employees redundant quite early on because of business interruption, you are allowed to rehire them and then claim for them on the job retention scheme. During the time that employees are furloughed, they cannot undertake any work for you. So they can't answer any emails, they can't do any marketing, not even a little small item that you might think isn't really work. They shouldn't be doing anything for you. And whilst they are on furlough, the employee's wage will be subject to the usual tax and other deductions, so student loan, employees NI. The only deduction at the moment that we have seen a temporary suspension on is a detachment of earnings, so a DEA deduction. If employees are on sick leave or self-isolating, you should be giving them SSP, and I will just go into a description of the COVID-19 SSP measures shortly. But after that point, they can be furloughed. And there has been some new guidance actually just before the bank holiday as well. So we already knew that if an employee was shielding, and that means if an employee has a pre-existing medical condition or they're a carer, which means that they needed to isolate, and if you were not able to provide the means for them to work at home during isolation, you could furlough them. We've now had confirmation that if someone is on sick leave and it's more beneficial for them in terms of pay, and for most people it would be, to be furloughed instead, you can actually convert that now. Obviously, you still have to have the same furlough paperwork in place. So you have to have deemed them as a furloughed worker and they have to accept that. The other thing to note, if an employee is on sick leave or self-isolating and they have got to their 4th day of not working for you, you can claim SSP for the whole period and pay that whole period out to the employee, up to a maximum of 2 weeks of SSP, and then you will be able to reclaim that from the government in the future. But as yet, we haven't had confirmation on how you will get that reclaim. We expect it will be an offset against your PAYE or NIC payment, but we're waiting for further guidance on that. I think Misha's having a little bit of trouble with her sound at the moment. With this poll, we are hoping that you will just take part and give us a bit more information on how you are finding this whole situation at the moment. Are you finding that there are other government grants that are going to be helping you in this situation? Or are you finding that you will be mostly relying on this CJRS scheme? There should be a place for you to answer the poll just on the right-hand side of your screen under polls.
Sorry, Katie, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
In fact, for the polls, could you just write yes or no in the question box? Because the poll thing, yeah, if you could just put the answers in there, just yes or no, and it will give us an idea as to whether any further support really is going to be required based on certain industries, because we've seen different across different industries. So it'll be interesting to see. So if you could pop yes or no in the question box.
Oh, it's quite a mixture.
Yeah, I was going to say it's quite a few. It's almost like for every 10 no's we're getting a yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it started out quite positive, but now it's mostly no. So I mean that gives us two things really. Either no, as in there aren't other grants that are going to be helpful, or no, this one grant is going to be all that's needed.
Mm,
So yeah, it's a shame we can't get those percentages up because that would have been interesting. But yeah, I mean, hopefully this scheme is going to be the main. It is going to help the majority of our clients. Obviously, we're aware that there are some kind of holes across all different types of businesses and industries, but we're hoping for the PAYE clients, as long as you can hold out until that payment, and that involves managing quite a lot of cash flow,
mm,
then we're hoping that for the majority of our clients, this will keep you going.
yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Back to you, Katie.
Okay, so if we just carry on through to administrating the changes. So in order to claim, you will need your PAYE reference number. Now, this is pretty standard. Most people have their PAYE reference number. But actually, in the guidance, and this threw everyone a little bit at first, it says your EPAYE reference number. And HMRC have confirmed that means that you need to have your employer online gateway login to HMRC. And on Thursday, just gone, they did actually issue some more guidance. And I think some of you will have received an email from them stating exactly how that will work. Because as agents, Paycheck has an online portal where we have access to online information for our clients, but we are a file-only bureau, and that means that we only have access to things like tax codes, student loans, change of NI numbers. We don't actually have access to see your PAYE accounts information, so we can't see when you've made a payment or when the RTI files have been processed, things like that. So what you do need as an employer is to register for HMRC Online, and I'll talk a bit more about that just after this section. So the number of employees that are being furloughed will need to be listed out, their names and their NI numbers. You will need to describe the claim period. So for most of you who are monthly payrolls, you'll be just claiming for March and perhaps April if you've already calculated your furlough information and you want to forward claim. For the weekly and fortnightly companies, we expect that you'll be claiming for several periods all at once. You'll have to describe the amount claimed, so you'll be describing your furlough amount. And it should be noted here that if you're furloughing an employee, you have to do so for a minimum of 3 weeks, and then it can be as long as it needs to be. And you also need to then include within that claim amount, besides the furlough pay, you need to include the employer's national insurance related to that furlough pay and the employer's pension related to that furlough pay. And the employer's pension can only be the minimum contributions, which would be 3% of qualifying earnings. In order to complete that claim, you then need your bank account and number and sort code, and this has to be for a UK bank account. So for our clients that are internationally based, if you're using our client account to make to transfer funds to us, for us to then back that out to your employees, you cannot use our client account for this repayment. That's due to anti-money laundering regulations. So you do need to work out a UK bank account for this claim. And then it will ask for your contact name and your phone number. And all of this will be done through that online gateway login that I explained before. Now, if you haven't had your online gateway login before, you can apply online for this. It can take up to 10 days to get your login. And one of the real kind of question marks we had over this when the guidance was issued just this time last week was how an employer could apply for this gateway login now, because when you apply online, HMRC will send you an activation code. That activation code has to be used within 2 weeks of it being issued. And previously, they were only issuing the activation code to your registered company address, which of course, if many of you have closed your businesses or are working from home, you may not have access to your registered company address. Now, just this morning, one of our clients called up to find out about this, and they were allowed to provide their own home address for the activation code to be sent to. So I believe that as long as you ask for this, there is now no barrier to getting your employer online gateway login. So when you call up, after this, we'll be sending you a kind of Q&A update link to our website, and we'll also include the link for PAYE online. Do make sure you apply for it, and make sure you ask to have that activation code sent to your home address instead of your registered business address.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. So we've got another poll. I'm really hoping that this one is going to work. So it should be coming.
There we go.
Perfect. So this one's slightly different, but should kind of marry up with the answers that we got before, hopefully. So will the government financial support keep you running for a few months? So it is what they've offered going to help support you and get you through this time. So if you could select yes or no, and we'll wait for a few responses to come back through. So we've got a lot of yeses coming through at the moment.
Which is great to hear.
Yeah. Which again, with all the no's that were coming through, it's obvious that from this
scheme is going to be a great help for the next few months. Yeah.
Which is good news.
Yeah, I mean we're a small spectrum of industry, of course, but it is what we've been seeing across the other webinars that we've done. In fact, actually, it's probably a higher percentage here. So that's really great for us to know that for our own clients, they are finding that this will be for the use it's intended to keep jobs.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, so 91% of you have said yes, this is enough. So yeah, that's really good news. Okay, just close that now and move on. So now it's over to you guys for your questions, and now's really your time to keep those coming. I know that for some questions that might get asked, that might generate and trigger something for you. So please feel free to keep asking them as we're going through the questions now. Bear with me a second, just going to start to get them up. Okay, so Casey, if I have part-time or seasonal staff, how do I calculate their average pay for furlough payments?
So if you are calculating sort of variable pay, you need to take the past 12 months pay, or if they are weekly, then it would be the past year, so 52 weeks. And the main thing that you need to consider is because the national minimum wage went up in April, rather than calculating an average of their pay, you should be calculating an average of their hours at the moment. So you would add up all of the hours over the past 12 months or 52 weeks. And if they have worked for only part of the year, then again, you would just take however many periods they have worked for you. Someone's worked 10 weeks, you calculate, total up the number of hours in 10 weeks, divide it by 10, so divide it by the number of periods to get your average weekly or monthly hours. And then you would multiply that by their current rate or by the national minimum wage if it's been set at that and has now gone up, in order to get your average pay for that period. And then I think we've got another question a bit later on about national minimum wage increases as they sort of go together. I'll just explain that the national minimum wage only applies if someone is working for you. So whilst they are furloughed, although you need to use the national minimum wage to calculate their average pay, obviously once you take it down to 80%, that means it's now below the minimum wage, and that is fine because they're not physically working for you at this point.
Perfect, thank you. I have live-in staff potentially validating security for insurance purposes. Can I furlough them?
Yes, that is fine. If you have staff, for example, in pubs sometimes or restaurants, you might have staff that actually live on the premises. As long as they are not actually working for you during that period, they're not providing any services, then that is fine, and not generating any revenue. You can continue to have them live in, and you can furlough them as any other staff member.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. What's the next? Are my staff accruing holiday pay? Can I ask them to take some of their holiday during the period we are closed?
Yes, so if you have permanent staff members, they continue to accrue holiday during the furlough period. If your staff have holiday booked, or if you would like to ask them to take some of their holiday, they can take it whilst they're furloughed, and you would pay them the 100% for that period. So you would only claim 80% of that period from HMRC, but you would pay the staff the 100% of their earnings during the time they're actually taking their holiday. Alternatively, you can ask your staff to keep on accruing their holiday to take later on. It's really up to you what suits your business model best, because if you have staff that are accruing lots of holiday and then when they all come back to work, it might be a problem if they then take all of that holiday. But there have been some COVID-19 measures introduced because of the situation with regards to holiday pay, where staff can now accrue that holiday and carry it over. So those minimum 4 weeks that they originally could not carry over, had to be taken, it can now be carried over for the following 2 years. So really you need to think about what works best for you. Do you want to have a big bank of holiday saved up for your staff, or does it suit you better to pay them the kind of top up 20% and have them take some of it now?
Perfect, thank you. As a director of my company, am I entitled to furlough myself?
Yes, you can. So originally it looked like that wasn't going to be a possibility, but HMRC have confirmed that as a director, you can furlough yourself as long as you do not do any work that is seen as income generation. So you can continue to do things, statutory tasks that are befitting the office of director. So, filing your accounts, perhaps some things like paying bills, but you cannot do anything that is seen as revenue generation or the normal service that your business provides. So you can furlough yourself and make that claim only for what you have put through on the PAYE scheme, not if you paid yourself some dividends. That would be an alternative situation. And you can make that claim and just continue to keep the mechanics of the business running.
Perfect, thank you. How are we supposed to pay bank holidays? Do we furlough and then top up the difference?
So the bank holidays would be treated in the same way as normal annual leave. If you have furloughed someone for the month of April, you've got 2 bank holidays that we've just had. You would, if the employees are if you're saying that these have been taken, then you would top up those 2 days by 20%. If you are asking the employees to accrue them, so take them in lieu for them to actually use at a later period, then you wouldn't do the top up to the 100%, but you would need to make sure that they are in your employees' records to take at a later time.
Okay, perfect. So I've had a couple of like paycheck specific questions, which are which will be helpful, I think, for everybody on this call.
Sure.
Can paycheck show furlough pay as a separate line on our employee pay slips?
Absolutely, and that's actually our recommendation. We would recommend it's best to separate the furlough pay from your normal basic pay, as later down the line there will be HMRC inspections. It will be much easier for you to validate your claim if you can show that your payroll reflected the exact same amounts.
Who submits furloughed staff information to HMRC, paycheck or the employer?
So that goes back to the part that I explained at the beginning. It's quite new guidance that only came out on Thursday. The facts are that we are a file-only bureau, so we submit information to HMRC on your behalf in terms of real-time information, and we can download tax codes and student loans, but we have no access to your accounts, your PAYE accounts through HMRC. So it would be you as the employer who can submit the furlough information, the actual claim to HMRC once you've got your employer online login, or you might have an accountant who has power of attorney and might have that access for you.
Perfect. If a member of staff is employed in two different roles at different locations of the same organisation, could they be furloughed for one of these roles only?
If they're employed for two different roles at two different locations at the same organisation, I think you'd have to check with ACAS to confirm exactly. But from my perspective, they would you'd have to furlough them from both roles, because they have one kind of employment with you. But if you have two different contracts, that might be a possibility. It's certainly not something we've come up against so far. I would advise that you speak to an employment lawyer on that point.
Okay. Is the scheme backdated, so salaries that were paid as normal in March, can these be included in the scheme?
They can be included in the scheme as long as you have the paperwork to back it up. So if you had furloughed employees and you exchanged that contractual change, and had all the right dates on them, then you can backdate the claim. That's not a problem. Obviously, we wouldn't rerun the March payroll now to change it if it had all been shown as basic pay. But as long as you have the right contractual paperwork in place, then that should be fine.
Perfect. I think we've answered the question already that's come through about does the employer apply or a paycheck.
Yeah.
So that we've already answered that one. So on the portal, do we claim the gross 80% of up to 2,500 or the net pay that it equates to?
It would be the gross 80% or up to 2,500. And so the whole figure before tax and national insurance is what you'd be claiming for the employee's gross wage. And then you would add the employer's national insurance, the equivalent employer's national insurance and employer's pension if the employee is in a pension scheme. If they're not, then of course you wouldn't claim the employer's pension.
Okay. How are consultants who are self-employed treated?
That would be a separate scheme. And so there is a scheme that's running for self-employed people as well. That we haven't got as much detail about that because we are running PAYE employees here. But as far as we're aware, it's a similar level of compensation. It's a slightly higher level in terms of the actual gross pay, but they're saying that the payouts will not be until June at the earliest.
Lovely, thank you. Is the 80% of basic salary, what about voluntary employee salary sacrifice because of pension?
So there has been some back and forth about how salary sacrifice is deemed because you are in a contractual you've made a contractual agreement with your employee when it comes to a salary sacrifice. Now, usually salary sacrifices are seen as a relatively unchangeable contractual agreement, but the pensions regulator has agreed that this pandemic is seen as a life-changing event, and that is when an employee can decide if they want to change from a salary sacrifice. So if your employee asks when being furloughed if they can change from a salary sacrifice to stop that exchange of salary, they can do that. You just need to make sure that you keep it or you keep all of that within your furlough contractual documentation. And then, of course, when it comes to the 80% of basic salary, if they've kept the salary sacrifice, then you would do it based on whatever that the salary is after the sacrifice, and you would need to continue making that payment to your pension provider. If they've decided to change back to a full basic salary, then you would work off that basic salary.
Thank you. I have a member of staff on a part-time contract. We wish to furlough him from this contract. However, he started a consultancy contract on the 2nd of March with us doing different work. Can he continue with this contract while being furloughed on his other part-time contract? So I think that's similar to the question before.
Yeah, so I mean, if he's on PAYE on a part-time contract with you, you can furlough him from that contract. If he is then doing work for you as a self-employed person providing invoices, I think that could be seen as as slightly problematic by HMRC, I would advise that you consult with an employment lawyer on that point as well.
Thank you. Is car allowance covered?
If it's included in your employee's contract, then the car allowance is covered. Of course, whether someone should be paid that car allowance when they are not actually allowed to travel is another question. But if it's already in your employee's contract and you haven't changed that in the furlough amendment that you make with them, then it is covered up to obviously the maximum £2,500 for the basic pay and the car allowance.
If you rehire an employee that was made redundant, should the furlough period be backdated to the date they left?
It should just be backdated to the date that you've rehired them. So if they were made redundant on the 1st of March and you rehire them on the 7th of March, you should only be paying them from the 7th of March.
Okay, thank you. Can we rehire employees regardless of why they left the business? For example, they didn't leave the business specifically because of coronavirus.
Our interpretation is that if they left because of business interruption, that would be the reason that they would be that would be the only reason that they could be rehired and then furloughed. Because if you've rehired them for another reason, it's quite difficult. The thing is, it will be difficult for HMRC to confirm either way. That the Chancellor did say that if someone had left and then found that their new employer were no longer going to take them on because of business interruption, they could go back to their ex-employer and ask to be put back on the books and furloughed. So there are two interpretations on this. I think as long as you can prove that you took them back on in good faith. So, for example, someone didn't then their new job got cancelled or for whatever reason. I think that will be the main thing, is just making sure that you have adequate proof of concept for the decisions that you make.
Thank you. I have an apprentice or an employee who turned 21 at the start of March and is now on £8.21 an hour, which started as of the 1st of March. Do I pay her 80% of her new wage or 80% of an average over the last 12 months?
You would pay her 80% of an average over the last 12 months. The indication has, unless it's to do with a minimum wage trigger, the indication has been that if people are due to have increases after the pay, it should either be the pay that they were on at the 28th of February or an average of the last 12 months, whichever is higher. So if it was due to increase on the 1st of March due to a pay rise, then you would have to take the pay as of the 28th of Feb or an average. But if it was due to a minimum wage change, which it doesn't sound like it is, I don't know if there's something to do with her age there, turned 21 at the start. But yeah, if it's to do with the minimum wage change, then you can use the new rate.
Thank you. Is there a different type of furlough letter required for ex-employees to standard employees?
Not as far as we're aware. There's only been the one furlough kind of contractual agreement spoken of there. It would really be up to you as to whether you change any of the kind of contractual obligations or agreements there. For example, if someone had a car allowance or various other allowances that in their contract before they left, and then you rehired them, you might want to consider whether those allowances are still involved in that agreement. But otherwise, there doesn't seem to be any need to have any different type of agreement.
Thank you. For hourly paid staff, should holiday pay be included to calculate the basic pay for furlough?
For hourly paid staff, so in terms of the actual basic pay that they've had, well, the figures that have been, or the types of pay that have been quoted by HMRC that should be included, they've listed regular wages, variable PAYE wages, fees, compulsory bonuses, and compulsory commissions. The following payments are excluded. So discretionary bonuses, discretionary commission, tips, trunk shares, non-cash payments such as healthcare, and use of a company vehicle. So in that respect, then holiday pay is considered a regular part of their wage. So when you're calculating the average, obviously because they're on variable hours, holiday pay does form the total of their pay. With salaried workers, people would take their holiday and it's already included in their salary. So with this situation, then it would be included.
If you have PAYE arrears, will the HMRC furlough payment claim be offset against the arrears first, or will the grant payment still be made to our bank account?
That's a very good question. We haven't had any confirmation or guidance on that. If you have PAYE arrears, you can make an application through time to pay. That's something that has always been around, but actually they've made it a lot easier to make the claim now. So if you're not aware, you can call HMRC. There's a time to pay helpline. You can explain that you've had business interruption, and you can ask for a delay on payment of your PAYE. And during the period that you've asked for this delay, so you can ask for 1, 2, or 3 months worth of delay, there will be no interest accrued during that period. Now, if you've already got some arrears before that point, I would advise you call up and make that time to pay agreement, because then at least over the following 3 months, there won't be as much interest accruing. And then at that point, after that 3 months, which is the maximum you can have the delay on at the moment, they will then discuss with you how to have or put in place with you a repayment fee, or sorry, not a repayment fee, a repayment option, and will agree with you if there are any interest fees. So that to me says that you can still make your claims and have that repaid directly to you, because they're looking at PAYE and PAYE debt as a separate situation to a grant to be able to keep your employees paid. So our interpretation is that they are separate. They're going to be seen as separate claims and payments. But if you do have some arrears, I would advise calling up and getting a time to pay agreement in place.
Lovely. If an employee was employed before the 28th of February but wasn't paid until after this date, are they still eligible for furlough?
This one has gone back and forth a few times with HMRC, because at one point they said as long as they have a contract from the 28th, they were eligible to be paid. And so our interpretation was that as long as they were on the RTI, the real-time information submission for March, with their start date as on or before the 28th, then that would be fine. We know there was something leaked from an MP earlier last week stating that if they weren't on the February RTI submission, that would be a problem. But again, more guidance came back last Thursday evening saying that as long as the contract was in place and they were on the real-time submission for March, that would be fine. So our interpretation is that if they were employed before the 28th, but then they weren't paid until March, that's still fine, because of course many people won't have known to pay their staff on the February payroll if they were employed after a certain point.
What happens if Paycheck sends our PAYE or national insurance?
So there are two interpretations of the question here. If we are making your PAYE and NIC payments to HMRC, and you've called up time to pay to get a delay, you do need to let us know so that we can stop sending those back to payments to HMRC for the period that you've agreed. But if you're talking about the real-time information submissions, we make those real-time information submissions on or before your pay date, but we do that as a file-only bureau. So the actual claim needs to come from you as the employer, and you need to have an HMRC online gateway for that for you to make that claim.
Will you be able to calculate the amount of NIL pension for, say, 3 weeks?
So if someone had been furloughed for 3 weeks, and then you perhaps had some pay going through for part of that month as well, you would have to pro rata the actual claim in terms of the NI and the pension. So say if you paid 100% for April, but only 80% of that was the furlough amount, you would then just claim 80% of the NIL pension.
You said that you can furlough rather than SSP if more. What can I do if I've already paid SSP instead of furloughed pay?
If you paid SSP for a period to an employee and actually they could have been furloughed during that point, my initial reaction would be that you should leave it for that period and furlough them at the point at which you are next paying the staff member. In terms of if it was if it was in the previous tax year, you wouldn't be able to reverse it now. If it was in this tax year, then potentially you could do some reversal work if it was a weekly payroll. But if you paid SSP in March, I wouldn't say that you can go back and do some reversals there. Again, you could check with an employment lawyer on that point, but from our perspective, HMRC will be expecting that you make those changes from the next pay period.
Thank you. We've had a couple of more specific questions come through about particular payrolls. We won't answer those on this call just because of GDPR and everything else, but we'll either myself, Katie, or your payroller will contact you to answer those. So just going back to more generic, are employers able to furlough staff from different dates, or do they all have to be the same date?
They can all be different dates because the amount of work that is available for your business to actually action can vary considerably depending on people's job roles. So people can be furloughed as and when the work situation applies. They don't all have to be on the same date.
Lovely. If you don't know how long your staff will be furloughed, can you make multiple claims?
So you don't need to make the whole claim as soon as the portal opens. On the 20th, you can make a claim for the period of which you know what is happening. So if you only knew what was happening for March and April, or even just March, maybe not even all of April, then you would just claim for the period that you know that you have all the right paperwork for and you have all the right figures for. And then later on, you can make another claim. HMRC will only be expecting you to claim up to and including the May payroll at the moment. So you would just need to make sure that you are, breaking down the information ready to claim as and when you have that exact data.
Okay. How could one apply back to March when we only just furloughed them from the 6th of April?
So you can't claim back to March if you've only furloughed them from the 6th of April. Applying to reclaim back to March only applies for businesses where they furloughed them in March.
Okay. Are Paycheck going to give or provide us a spreadsheet to help us work out NI and pension amounts?
We are working behind the scenes on a type of calculator. We are reticent to issue it as yet because the guidance has been changing every few days. We do think that we have come up with something that could be helpful, but we would like to wait until we've had confirmations on all of the different aspects, all the different possible questions with the wider payroll industry and with HMRC policy first. That is the problem at the moment, is that not every answer has been given yet. So we are looking at something, potentially a spreadsheet that will help you, or at least some guidance that will help you. And when we're very happy that that has all been confirmed, then we'll communicate a bit more about that.
Okay, thank you. Can you furlough staff that that's to do with the minimum 3-week period?
Yes, you can. So you can furlough staff for a minimum of 3 weeks. If you then bring them back to do a bit of work, you can then furlough them again. But again, that next period of furlough would have to be a minimum of 3 weeks from what we've understood there. So you would need to, maybe you might have a little rota going on with some of the staff to make sure that some of them still get 100% at certain points. If you still have some work to be doing in your business, you just need to make sure that you have all of the right paperwork in place for that.
Okay. Do we need to detail furlough pay on pay slips in order to be able to claim?
HMRC haven't said that it has to be detailed as a separate pay adjustment, but we are, for any furlough that we are processing, we are asking to detail it separately in order to make it easier for you to recognise the figures to make a claim. And it will also make it a lot easier later on if HMRC decide to audit you. They have been very clear that they will be auditing in vast numbers at some point. Who knows how they're going to do that, but they have said that. So it would be for both for you, for your employees, and for our sakes, it would be best to detail it separately.
Okay. Can you claim on a monthly basis or only at the end of the 3 months?
You can claim on a monthly basis, and actually you can reclaim a little bit ahead of the month if you know your figures. So on the 20th of April, HMRC have said that they could expect that you'll be claiming for March and forward claiming for April if you know your exact figures by then. They're not
Okay.
expecting that you'll be making a claim for May at that point, though.
Okay. Holiday will be paid at the 400%. Do we yet know whether HMRC will cover 80% of that cost via the CJRS refund, or will the employer have to cover the 100%?
So HMRC will cover 80% of that cost if the holiday was taken during the furlough period. So the employer only has to cover the extra 20%. And then, of course, it does mean that your employees are receiving a bit more money that way, and it means that you don't have as much holiday accrued at the end of the period when they come back to work.
Okay. Can I apply retrospectively for part of March, even if we had processed payroll prior to making the decision to furlough? Or can you only furlough from the point of signature of agreement with the employee?
You can only furlough from the point of signature. So whatever the date is on that agreement with the employee, that's the date at which you can furlough from.
Thank you. When I submit my payroll information to your agent, do I indicate that each person should be furloughed at 80% of normal monthly pay?
Yes, that's right. We'd expect you to say the date at which they were furloughed and indicate that it would be 80% of normal pay that they should be receiving, or whether any of that pay should be topped up, because some employers are topping it up to the full 100%.
Thank you. Can you reduce an employee's holiday entitlement for the period that they are on furlough, or do they accrue holiday as normal?
So for all permanent staff and for some temporary staff, they accrue holiday as normal. We are aware that for recruitment agencies, if they have employees on temporary agency contracts, they do not accrue holiday as normal. But for regular temporary employees and for permanent staff, they should accrue holiday as normal.
Okay, thank you. You suggested a 10-day turnaround time for the refund. I've seen a 3 to 4 day turnaround mentioned elsewhere. Have HMRC confirmed this yet?
So HMRC haven't confirmed this in actual public guidance yet, but we have seen kind of some of the policy that's been issued to the industry. We have seen them say as little as 3 to 4 days because it's a back payment, but you have to consider that they do need to verify or review the claim before they trigger that back payment. So the moment at which they verify the claim, then it's a 3-day turnaround for a back payment to go into your account. That's 3 working days, but they probably need a day or two to make those claims. And really, we don't know how many people are going to hit the website on the 20th of April, whether the website will be able to withstand that amount of traffic is a big question mark until that day. So we would suggest that in terms of if you're trying to work out cash flow, we'd suggest considering it as a minimum of probably 10 days to get that turnaround on the funds.
Okay.
And then it'll just be a nice surprise if it's any quicker.
How will the maternity pay be affected if someone is furloughed from April and the baby is due in June?
So they should go on SMP as normal in June, but obviously if you furlough them, at the moment they have not changed any of the guidance for calculating maternity pay. So if you furlough them for a few periods before they are due to have their maternity, if one of those periods falls into the average weekly pay calculation, it does mean that their average weekly pay will be reduced for the maternity period. Now, depending on when in June they're due, it sounds like April probably won't fall into that period because it's the 8 weeks before the 15th period that affects that average weekly pay calculation. But obviously, if you have some people going on maternity a bit later in the year, then it could be a possibility. And HMRC have not changed any guidance on that point. But your person going on maternity should still go on maternity as normal, and they will receive maternity pay as normal for that period. And you, as an employer, would get 92% of that reclaimed as normal, unless you're a very small employer, in which case you can actually reclaim 103%.
We have commission-based staff. Do we know how this will work?
If the commission is guaranteed in their contract, then HMRC have said compulsory commissions are included within the calculation. But if they are non-guaranteed commissions, then then they're not included within the actual CJRS calculation.
Does overtime get included in the basic pay calculation for furlough? If so, how do you calculate?
Overtime isn't considered as a regular payment usually, unless they are specifically contracted to do a certain amount of overtime. It should just be their basic pay calculation, unless they work. Say if they work, say a 0 hours contract, and you sometimes pay, or say if they work a 5 hours a week contract, and then you pay them 5 hours sometimes as additional as a kind of a top up pay. If you see that as part of some regular hours, and you can see that they've done that literally most of the period in which you're calculating their average for, if you can validate that that's their pretty much regular hours, then you could include that in the calculation. You just have to have a good kind of argument for your decision making with these sorts of situations. If you can prove that someone was on a 5 hours a week basic pay contract, but they regularly worked 5 hours extra, and you've included it for that point, then that's fine.
Okay. In calculating staff wages whilst on furlough, do I tell Paycheck their gross pay and we calculate 80% of that if we are not topping up their pay to 100%? If not, what is required from us?
Our preference is that when you send us the payroll, you tell us what the actual furlough pay should be and tell us whether you have applied that 80%. We're aware that for some clients, they might find that difficult if you've got a lot of pro-ratering to do. So there might be situations where you might ask us to help you with some of that calculating in the payroll. But by and large, if you are submitting to us furlough pay, we would prefer that you tell us the actual furlough pay amount, because we don't know what you've put in your contracts with the employees. So you need to check what you've actually agreed to pay them and then tell us that amount.
Okay. And someone has actually asked us off the back of that, do they need to submit a separate payroll report for anyone specifically on furlough?
As in, submit to us a separate
payroll
spreadsheet?
report?
Yeah,
I would assume that's the question, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you already submit to us a template, then just add another column on that template and just head that as furlough and put those furlough amounts in there. It doesn't need to be on a separate spreadsheet. It can all be on the same place.
Okay. We've taken the annual basic pay on seasonal staff rather than hours worked, as it includes overtime hours. Is this incorrect?
Sorry, could you just read that one again? Just trying to find that question.
Yeah, of course. We have taken the annual basic pay on seasonal staff rather than hours worked, as it includes overtime hours. Is this incorrect?
If they have a contracted regular basic pay amount, then that's the amount that you would use. If you have them working variable hours in reality, then you should take that variable hours and process an average. It really depends on how closely to the contracts your staff are working. if you know that you have them on certain contracts, but actually they always work a much higher amount or a much lower amount, then it would be best to take the actual amounts that are going through the payroll and average them.
Okay. Is it okay to still charge living rent for furloughed employees?
I mean, you still have to pay rent, so like anyone else, they would have to continue to pay their rent. There have been there is separate guidance about rent holidays that people can apply for and things like that. But if they are still living there, then they would still, you would still have the same deductions in terms of living rent.
Okay, perfect. I know we're coming near to the end now, so I'm just having a look to see if there are any massively different questions.
There's one about commission earned in March before being furloughed, which would be paid in April. So we have had the question about past commission earned and past overtime earned. That should still be paid to the employee, but it cannot be included in the furlough amount. So you would only include the basic pay in the furlough amount.
Okay. If an employee voluntarily left our employment in March, can we re-employ them and furlough them from that date?
You can. It's at your discretion. If you would want to, they can apply to rejoin and be furloughed immediately. HMRC did confirm that. It's completely at your discretion. You're under no obligation to do so, but if you're happy to do that, you can.
Perfect. I'm due to have someone come back from maternity leave shortly that we would furlough. Do I use her normal salary as the calculation?
Yes, you would do. So you could go back to the same period last year and ask them to, so you go back to the same period last year and either you would pay them what was paid then, or if that's not really equivocal to what's on their contract, you would just go with what's on their contract.
Okay. We have furloughed few staff from April and few staff are still working from home. We think that from June, few staff who are working from home won't have enough work to do. So that case, can we furlough the remaining staff from June?
Yes, if there isn't enough work to do, then you can furlough staff members as and when the business needs it.
Okay. The gross wage, is this before the deduction of employee auto-enrolment contributions or taxable salary?
So the gross wage would be before any deductions, unless it's a salary sacrifice. And in that case, it would be after the salary sacrifice, if the salary sacrifice continues to be applied.
Okay. Just seeing if there is anything else that is really different because I
think we've got one here. We pay a monetary amount in lieu of healthcare benefits. Do we continue to pay that? Do we add that to the amount we can claim? So you cannot add that to the amount that you can claim. And in terms of whether you continue to pay it, that really is down to the agreement that you make with the employee when you furlough them. So if you have included it within the furlough agreement, then you need to continue to pay it, but you cannot reclaim for that as part of the scheme.
Okay. Okay, we have actually still had quite a lot of questions, so I think because of the time, I don't want anybody to feel like they have to stay on for even longer. Katie, do you agree that we could follow up with some of these questions?
Yeah, I
after
think
today's session?
what we're going to do is we're going to put this all onto our website as a Q&A. So every question that has been asked, we'll collate them all into buckets and we'll put them up on our website. So when you have signed off, you will receive a recording, probably tomorrow. We'll send you a recording of the webinar and also a link to our Q&A with all of the questions and answers.
Yeah, because we have had a lot of questions come
Yeah.
through.
I think
That
most of them most of them are quite similar. So where we might not have answered one directly, we've answered something similar. Um, but we will be going through all of these and just writing up the answers onto the website. And for any points where we've said refer back to HMRC or refer to an employment lawyer or an HR advisor, we'll add links to the people that we use as various HR or employment law services, and also we'll add the links to the HMRC guidance and where you can apply for HMRC online.
Yeah, perfect. And I've made a note of those of you who have asked more specific questions about your payroll. So I will reach out to your payroller this afternoon and ask them to get in touch with you as well to answer some more specific questions. Just off the back of this session today, we do have or I'm hosting another webinar on the 29th of April, which will again be going through furlough and what's going on at the moment in terms of coronavirus, but actually with one of our partners, Corona HR. So they will be our guest speakers, and they will be basically again answering questions, but more from an employment law and employee health and wellbeing side of things. So if you'd like to join, please just pop that in the question box as well, and I can send you the link to register more specifically. But thank you for dialing into the session today. As I said, hope you're all keeping healthy and safe. But if you think of anything at the end of the session, my email address is on your screen, so you are more than welcome to drop me a quick email and I can point you in the right direction. But I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll speak to some of you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.